One.
Okay, good morning. It is Thursday, January 13th. This is the Senate Apportionment Committee meeting. And I think that last time we met, we decided that probably the most important thing that we can do today is to figure out, first of all, when we're going to be meeting, and should we be regular or flexible, or how we want to do that, and then how we function and how we make use of Nick's skills here and work with him individually as a committee and with the other 23 senators. So let's take that one on first before we go to the scheduling, because we can always quickly schedule another temporary meeting if we have to, but I think we need to figure out how we're going to function and how I had hoped actually that we had been working with some students at Middlebury who were geography mapping students. I didn't quite get their expertise, but who were we were going to try and have them working with us as a committee, because there are a lot of requests that are going to come forth from people, and it's putting a lot of pressure on Nick because he's just one person and he's serving both us and the House. I understand, right? Is that right, Nick? Okay. So we had hoped to have those, but in the end, I guess the professor felt that it was inappropriate for them to be doing what he considered partisan political work, which I don't see this as, but he did. So we do not have those student interns. So does anybody have any, my thought was that, I'll just kick this off. My thought was that that individual members should be able to go to Nick and ask for and make suggestions and what it would look like. But with 180 people doing that, that puts him in a bad position, and it puts him in the position of having to prioritize whose requests come in first, whether it's the House or the Senate, and individual members or the committees. So I don't know if anybody has thought about this. I know that when we did this 10 years ago, we had a lot of people running around doing maps and looking at things. We didn't have the sophisticated maptitude then, but a lot of people were running around making requests and doing maps. And I still have about 80 of them underneath on the shelf underneath my desk in the chamber, made into a dress and a hat for cabaret. But anyway, Chris, you were one of the ones that brought this up. Have you given this any thought about how you think we should operate?
Not a ton of thought, but I mean, 10 years ago, that little room at the top of the stairs, 41 or whatever, was just kind of staffed full time with the map on a big screen. And so my experience was it was hit or miss, or maybe people had appointments, but that was just sort of running. I was emailing Nick yesterday to learn how it would work with a screen share, and it's, I gather, possible, but a little clunky. But so I don't know how Nick should organize his time, but maybe they're just blocks that are Senate and the House is more complicated. It's hard and there's more of them. So they get more of the blocks or something. I don't know.
I think Ameren just had a thought.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Ameren Abergele Legislative Council. I just wanted to share with the committee what we've been talking about internally for the reapportionment team at Legislative Council, and what we've been working on with the IT staff at the legislature to try and figure out how we can make this all work. Certainly, we had all hoped that everything would be in person, and It would just be a matter of figuring out how to not clog up hallways while people wait for their turn with Nick's time. So we met with IT again yesterday to talk through how we can make this all work, and to sort of finalize some of the ideas we had been discussing over the last few weeks. So as to some of the more technical aspects of this, I will leave that to Nick to explain, but as a high overview, what we will be setting up and is in the process of setting up is an online calendar where you will be able to book a slot of Nick's time. You will see what slots are available. You won't be able to see who else is requesting his time, nor will they be able to see that he's meeting with you. Just for purposes of confidentiality, we're trying to keep things as easy to book, but also maintaining confidentiality for you all as you come in and make individual requests. So given the separation of the IT staff out of legislative council between this reapportionment cycle and the last reapportionment cycle, as you know, there is a privilege attached to our office in statute that is not necessarily connected to the now separate division of legislative IT. So for that reason, we are trying to keep the actual drafting requests that are not public with Nick, and to the extent that he is overextended, we have asked that the legislative IT staff be available to either work with Maptitude in committee or work on those requests that are clearly public that the committee has discussed in a way that's streamed on YouTube and everyone is aware of what's happening. So the idea is that we're going to have some of his time blocked off for committee time. Some of his time will be reserved for request time. And I think, to be honest, the first couple weeks are going to be a bit of trial and error while we figure out to what extent we can block off portions of his day. And also some of that will depend on your committee and the House Government Operations Committee having a somewhat consistent schedule so that we know when he will be needed or when someone from IT staff will theoretically be needed. IT, I hear, is somewhat short on staff at the moment. So we're trying, to the extent possible, work everything we can through Nick and through our office. But if we are asking for their help, trying to give them as much advance notice time so that they can reshuffle their workload. So Senator White, I don't know if you want to hear now from Nick more about the calendaring or if you have questions.
I guess my question is, are we assuming, I guess as a committee and as a staff, are we assuming that any one of when you talk about individual requests, that any one of the 180 people can make those requests? Or is it just committee members that can make those individual requests? Because I can see now, if 180 people make a request of an hour of his time, that goes well into November or something.
The answer to your question is yes. We don't restrict who can request. There will be, to some extent, a prioritization of requests, which is not going to be Nick's responsibility. That will be with me or with someone from my office. We will, for example, within a day, if someone has if an individual legislator who is not connected with one of the two reapportionment committees makes a request and would like it done that day, but we also have a request from the chair of one of those two committees regarding a map that is going to be viewed in committee that day, that map that's going to be viewed in committee is going to take priority over an individual request that is not needed for committee that day. And I would say if an individual legislator says, but I would like to bring this into committee today and share it with the committee, my response would probably be, have you discussed this with the chair? I would need direction from the chair to let us know that this is going to be in committee today. And if we are encountering a lot of that happening, then we're going to need to start pulling in IT staff to help free up next time.
Chris, I see. Chris, I don't know if you had your hand up or if you were waving goodbye.
No, I'm staying with us, Madam Chair.
No, I
but,
meant waving goodbye to somebody in the room. Okay, Chris.
well, just to, are there any other people that have Maptitude? I think, if I recall, 10 years ago, the major parties got a copy or something, and that was a way to ease some of the pressure. So I'm just curious if that's been considered or.
So what each major party receives is a copy of the census data for this reapportionment, which is separate from the license access to Maptitude. So in the past, legislators have been able to use Maptitude if they would like to, subject to sort of the limits that we have on our current license for Maptitude. So at the moment, I believe we can have up to 30 people who are able to use it, but only 8 people can be using Maptitude at any one time, right? So it's not to say we're not necessarily restricting who can use the Maptitude, but there is going to be some level of shuffling if many people want to use it. I will also say that this was a conversation that we had with IT yesterday also about if legislators are interested in using Maptitude, what would that training look like? How long does it take to be trained on Maptitude? So the manufacturer's guideline for Maptitude, which IT says is roughly on par, depending on the individual's prior experience, either with some kind of mapping software or just their aptitude for technology, is 8 hours of training to become familiar with Maptitude. And so I know that for the Legislative Apportionment Board, there were maybe 1 or 2 people who used it a little bit, but I think they relied a bit more heavily on District Builder, and then used IT staff to input those maps into Maptitude in a way that they could see. So what we can have for legislators certainly is, so there are some tools that are in your toolbox outside of Maptitude, right? We can have individual district maps down to the census block level so that you can use actual maps and work that way, and then just use Maptitude to put it into a form that would be viewable in committee or more readily shareable maybe with others. And then there's also, if you're looking specifically at if you're looking at the LAB maps, you have the majority or adopted map, and then the minority, also called the alternate map. Some of those maps are available already online, and we can talk a little bit about the tools that the Secretary of State's office set up for towns and cities to view those maps and to be able to zoom in and see close level detail. So I think there are a lot of ways that legislators will be able to explore the different maps and how to do them. And for those who are interested in taking the time to really dig into how Maptitude works, we can arrange that with IT staff. And my only other comment about that is the committees will be working with Nick on specific maps for the committee. And to the extent that legislators are creating separate Maptitude maps, those maps may or may not be based on the same version of a map that the committee is working off of. So there could potentially be some inconsistencies between the two, which is why I think in the past, most of the maps have actually come through the IT Maptitude drawing rather than individuals bringing forward their own maps. It gets kind of shuffled through to make sure that you're looking at sort of apples to apples. So that was a lot of information and thought. So I will stop there.
Senator Clarkson, I saw you had a question.
Yeah, I think that the notion that 180 people have access to NIC is a little overwhelming, and it strikes me that maybe we give that 2 weeks and then we can reconsider that policy, because I think going through a committee member, a request going through a committee member, there's certainly enough of us, any one of our senator colleagues could come through us. I think it does make sense to use us as the funnel for some of these. Otherwise, we're just, Nick's just doing a ton of individual requests. I think that's going to be very overwhelming for Nick, quite frankly. And I think training some of us on how to use one form of those map online, it makes some more sense. And then we could have sort of mini expertise either in the Senate or both in the House and the Senate. But I would say, we could start with that, everybody having access and booking time with Nick. But I would revisit that ASAP, because I think that will be overwhelming for Nick. He's new to the legislature. He doesn't even know everybody. Anyway, I don't hold out much hope for that idea.
So, yeah, I do. I think that maybe I misunderstand this, but I know some of the requests won't be to create a whole new map, but what would, if for example we moved Wilmington back into Windham County, that's right, I remember that now. If we move it back into there, how does it impact the deviation in Bennington County? I mean, I don't care about all of the rest of this stuff. I just want to know, what does it do to Bennington County? And then would that mean we'd have to make adjustments to Bennington County, or is the deviation still within a reasonable range for Bennington? So I think those are a lot of the kinds of requests that are going to come in, not to create a whole new map.
Right.
But just what would happen if we moved Orange back into Orange County, or things like that, as opposed to whole new maps. So I think Nick has his hand up. I think we'll go to him now and then continue the discussion. So thanks, Nick.
I thank you. For the record, Nick Atherton, mapping specialist with the Office of Legislative Counsel. I was just going to address your last point, which is that sort of question, that sort of speculative question, like what happens if we shift a boundary to include or exclude a town or a voting district or something like that, is really where Maptitude excels, and that can generate answers very quickly. So that's actually the sort of thing that I think Amran and I have been anticipated should be easily addressed in, for instance, a half-an-hour session here in my office, or over a Zoom call, or during committee, as those sorts of issues come up. The more time-intensive application of Maptitude would be to create and print, for instance, a district or state map. Actually, the district maps are fairly easy to do, but doing multiples can add on time. It's more when I'm trying to create like an entire map of the state or a region or something like that. Maptitude is optimized for viewing and manipulating data at the district level. That's really the unit around which all of its functions are built. So yeah, so doing sort of graphic design and layout and stuff like that is really where the time-intensive part comes from. So that is to say, preparing materials for committee is actually where so far most of my time has been taken up, and just sort of small, individual, discrete questions about about small adjustments are relatively easy to take care of. So I figured I'd offer that, and yeah, I just wanted to offer that information.
Thanks. So if we have 30. Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Perchlik.
Thank you. My question is some of this data, and maybe it's just the census data, available as just like in an Excel spreadsheet or a database? Because I think some of those questions about deviation of population, you don't need a map. You could just do it in a table format, just like, okay, the numbers are too far. I'm not gonna go to Nick with this one because it's just not gonna work.
Right.
So do we have access to that? I'm assuming we do, but I thought I'd just check.
I think on the Secretary of State's website.
It's all there. And is it as like a PDF or as in like an Excel or something like that?
I don't know what I was playing with before was a map that had the population of each town. And then it had the counties, the current districts with their deviation. So, and I don't know where that came from. Somebody sent it to me in hard copy, a map, but I think it was from the I think Nick has an answer.
Okay.
The answer is I don't actually know exactly who cleaned and uploaded the data into Maptitude, the census data into the version of Maptitude I'm using. But obviously someone did. They stripped out some of the information that would come with just the raw census data to make it a little bit easier to use. I imagine that was either someone on the LAB or on the Secretary of State or the Secretary of State's office. But if you'd like, I could look into that. It would probably be a useful exercise for my own purposes as well.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
So any more thoughts about how how we should do this? Is my question, one of my questions was, if we have 30 people that can have access under the license, and it takes about 8 hours of training for a competent person, for me it would take 2 weeks, so I'm not gonna even try and go there. But are there any slots left out of that those 30 people that can have access or can be on the license, that we could have somebody trained? And if the answer is yes, is there somebody who wants to be trained and give up that time? Because that means it would be additional time for you, because you would have to do the training. You'd have to be working with IT and Nick around applications and stuff, and also then fielding requests. So I don't know if, I certainly don't have the time, and I certainly don't have the expertise to even think about it, but I don't know. So the first question, I guess, is there even room, should someone want to, in those 30 people? Is there a slot left over? Amron?
All I can say is that I am not sure. I know that there's a number of people within our office and within the IT staff who are necessary to have the access, but I can check. I don't know.
Because I know there was a conversation in the House about individual committee members having access to it, and I don't know where that went, but Allison. Oh, and then Chris.
So maybe it makes sense to have, to give one of those slots to a Senate committee member and one of those slots to a House committee member, so that we know at least one legislator that we can all go to on that committee has additional capacity, if Nick would appreciate that. We have a couple, legislators who are really IT capable, Chris being one of them, and Andy, I'm sure, is capable. And I'm not going to say Bobby and Jeanette and Brian and I are brilliant at this, but we old dogs can learn new tricks.
No, not here.
Yeah. You've learned a lot of new tricks, my dear, in the last 2 years.
Not this one. This is very complicated.
But it strikes me that if we saved Ameren at least one per committee for a legislator to be booted up and trained, that might make some sense just as a holding thing.
Well, we have to figure out. Oh, Chris, I'm sorry.
Well, this is where I come back to the parties, because my memory 10 years ago was turning to sort of out of the building in that sense, doing some thinking, and then bringing them back to the whoever it was that had Nick's slot. You remember, what's that guy's name that was down in Orange County. It was, anyway, they're Nick, I think. It was a different Nick, right?
Nick,
I remember
Nick Cherrick.
Nick Cherrick. I remember
yeah.
wrestling with him sometimes. So
Yeah.
you know, we clearly need to not all be putting pressure on this Nick, and that sort of natural organization of both the House and the Senate leads itself to that. I think. I mean, I don't know, but so I don't know if that conversation's happened or is realistic. Just logistically, I run a Mac, so I don't know if Maptitude. I'm not dying to be a Senate staffer for this effectively, but in fact, I really don't think that's appropriate. But I don't even think it's possible. So anyway, those are a couple thoughts.
Yeah, you're right. If each, yeah, I wish I could fully remember 10 years ago. You were on the committee 10 years ago, as was Jeanette.
I wasn't on the committee, but I
As
was progressive
progressive
caucus
chair.
leader, so I
Yeah.
was sort of knee deep in it. Anyway, that's my memory. It was not only staff, it was staff sort of after you had your pretty close to a final draft, and then they made sure it made sense, it was accurate, and then you could bring those maps.
I don't remember that that there were. I remember John Campbell was running around a lot doing maps, but I don't remember any outside of the Senate. I mean, outside of the building. There may have been. I just don't
They were
remember.
in the building, is my memory, but it was, you know, different corners.
No, I mean outside of like Nick.
Yeah.
So first of all, does anybody on this committee have any appetite, if it's even possible, for taking on that additional job, which I think is going to require a ton of extra work?
Well,
No.
I think we're all pretty busy serving on two committees, and with our chairs and vice chairs and all our other responsibilities, I don't really see how any one of us has much free time.
I think it's a little different in the House where they have 11 members on the committee, and it is that committee. That's what they're doing. It isn't as if they have their other committee work. Here, this is a separate committee, so we all have our other committee work to do. So I think it's a little different over there. If they want to have a person trained, that's up to them. But Bobby?
Yeah, I think we ought to try to decide. I think the apportionment board with these single member Senate districts and all that screwed everything all up. And I think we ought to try to determine how serious we are doing single member districts, or if we're going to try to stick to a simpler version of just reapportioning what we have and moving things around so it'll work a little better with our population that we have today versus 10 years ago. And if we aren't going to stir the pot completely up, there's no need of getting too excited about getting extra people and all this. If we're going to stick to our districts somewhat like they are, and just move a few numbers like you mentioned, Madam Chair, one town here, one town there, it's going to be a lot simpler than if we try to go to single member Senate districts.
So first of all, let me respond to that. First of all, I think that we owe it to the apportionment board to hear both the majority and the minority report and their map and their reasoning behind it. I do know that there is in the Senate a very little appetite to go to single member districts. But I think that we owe it to the apportionment board to hear that and to hear why they went there and how it would affect us. But I think that it isn't as simple as moving a town here and there. In my part of the state, that is pretty simple. But we move Londonderry, or we move Wilmington, and then we move Brandon or whatever, and it isn't that complicated. But when you get to the Northeast and the Northwest, it is not a simple matter of moving a town here and there. There is that those two areas have huge population differences from what they had. And that part of the state is going to be very complicated. And I think that's where the requests are going to come from, around those two areas. And remember, we also chopped up Chittenden County. So you can't even move a town in or out of Chittenden County to make up for the 6-member district. That whole area has to be chopped up. So, and there are many different ways of doing it. So I think that it isn't a simple matter of moving a town here and there, except in my area, it would be a little bit easier. Mine and Brian's.
And mine.
And yours, yeah. But down here, so south of Route 4, it isn't as complicated as north of Route 4. So, yeah, Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Bobby has kind of touched on a question that I had, but I didn't know at what point it was appropriate to ask it. So I'll just go ahead and ask it, because this is the first time I've been through this. If you look at the existing districts, is there a threshold of deviation that we should look at to say, okay, we need to really concentrate on this area, but not so much on this one? I mean, I've read the report, and it was like a 45, 46-page report. And inside it, it seems to indicate that a plus or minus 9% deviation reaches a level where there's some constitutional concern. But if a district has a -3 or -4% or +3 or +4%, I guess what I'm asking, is there an ideal threshold at which we should say, aha, that really needs to be looked at? And I realize there's a what am I trying to say? A triggering point where if you touch this, you touch 3 other counties. I understand that. But if you just take a look at the existing map, it seems like there are some that are not really in serious trouble, for lack of a better way to put it.
Well, I think that what I remember from last year is that there isn't any defined absolute deviation that exists. What you need to do is you need to look at the maximum deviation that exists in some county and the high and the low, and you need to add those together. And that shouldn't be more than about 10 or 11 or 12. And that's adding them all together. So for example, right now, I think Chittenden County is at 25, is over by 25, and somebody is under by 9. That makes it about 36 deviation points. That's way, way unconstitutional. That would never be accepted. So I think that it is a matter of looking at the deviations, but if you do something over here to affect the deviation here, you're impacting this, and that's going to be the problem across the northern tier of the state.
Yeah, it becomes almost a whack-a-mole kind of.
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Tom has an answer. So Tom, would you like to weigh in?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, it's Tom Little, Chair of the Apportionment Board. One of the links that was discussed at yesterday morning's committee meeting, that was information put together by the Vermont Center for Geographic Information, VCGI, I found very helpful. I kept going to it all the time because on one source, it has the population change numbers for all towns and all counties, both expressed as numbers of people and as percentages. And it does the same for the legislative districts. And if you look at the existing Senate districts, you get these numbers. So when the existing Senate districts were enacted in 2012, the overall deviation, which is the difference between the greatest negative and the greatest positive, was 18.01, which I guess for students of apportionment is on the high side, but no one went to court to challenge it. The existing overall deviation using the 2020 census for the current Senate districts is now a 25.9. And that's Chittenden. The Chittenden district is a plus 15.7, plus 15.7, and Essex Orleans is minus 10.2. But Franklin is a plus 13.2, and Lamoille is a plus 13.2 also. And then on the negative side, you've got 3 Senate districts that are between -8 and -8.6, and those are Rutland, Addison, and Caledonia. Bennington's a -7.6. So you've got at the high end, I'm sorry, well, at the low end in terms of population deviation, it's Essex Orleans at a -10.2, and then you've got Caledonia, Addison, and Rutland in the low to mid 8s, and on the positive side, it's Lamoille and Franklin at plus 13.2 and Chittenden at plus 15.7. So there's some work to do. But as Senator Collmore pointed out, you've got Orange is a -5.1, Washington's -7, Wyndham's -2.7, Windsor's -5.1, Grand Isle Chittenden is a +6. So there are some that are much less so.
Chris, thank you, Tom.
Can I just ask Tom, what was that resource? You're saying that's, if you look at the current districts, we see sort of the minimum amount of work we have to do would be to fix those. So that is a valuable starting point. What is that resource called?
Well, I will send the link to your committee, Senator. It's something that you can get to from the Apportionment Board website, but
Right.
it's on the Vermont Center for Geographic Information website at the Agency of Digital Services.
Okay.
So it's vcgi.vermont.gov /data-release/2020 census.
If you could send us the link, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I think it was also on the Secretary of State's website. I think Chris
It is.
Winters pointed it out yesterday on his website.
It is,
Yeah.
but I'll send it on over now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Tom, that was very helpful because the map that's in the report, and when I just reread it, I realized it says as adopted by the General Assembly in 2012. So for instance, Rutland shows up there as only a -3%, but that's a 2012 number, then not the one that we're currently going to be working with.
Yeah,
Right.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, committee, where are we in terms of what I think that we should do right now is, in order to be helpful to Nick and Ameren here, I think we should come up with a definite time when we can have our meetings so that they can schedule it. And Amron, I don't know, I think we'll leave it up to you to determine whether you need to be present with us all the time or not. Nick certainly would be great to have you present with us, but so any suggestions from committee members of when is a good time to regularly meet? Yes, Senator Clarkson.
Well, I hate to say this because you all know how I feel about early morning meetings, but I think that 8 o'clock on Wednesday, if that's possible, seemed like a good time. And I know it means many of us can't make some meetings that we'd like to, but it strikes me that 8 to 9 on Wednesdays is a good anchor. And then maybe we could have a floating second time that worked with everybody, like a lunchtime on Friday or a lunchtime on Wednesday. For these first 2 weeks, our Randy and I have been kind of hijacked into Senate rules and joint rules during those times, but those are floating times that seem available. But I think if we anchor ourselves with one morning time, 8 to 9, makes some sense.
Other people? Yeah, Brian?
Thank you. I'll go along with that. I'd be willing to forego my caucus meeting, which is every Wednesday morning at 8 to do this, because I think this is, I don't want to say it's more important, but it's equally as important. So I like Wednesday morning at 8 and Friday at noon. I think that's good.
Randy? Oh, Chris?
Well, go ahead, Randy.
I'm fine with those times.
I'm fine with those times. Friday is hard because of floor at 11:30, but for the first several weeks, that's likely going to work.
Yeah.
Although it's tricky tomorrow, I think for a few of us. But I also wonder about Tuesday, since we're virtual. Tuesday at 9, we'd have a half an hour, or even 8:30. It gets to be. I think we should set up as many regular times as we can. Myself and I would also offer Tuesday morning, because that strikes me as we have a late start that morning.
Even Tuesday.
Is difficult for some members who travel, particularly when we're back in session. Secondly, we have a caucus on Tuesday morning regularly. One issue on Friday that we might be able to think about with chairs is to provide at least a set time after the floor session for afternoon chairs meetings to begin. And, as everybody has to give up something, it may be that we cut into some of the time for the afternoon committee meetings for that purpose. I mean, there are only so many hours in a day.
So so Wednesday at 8, everybody is okay with? Is that?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we've got that one. And then I do think that for right now, when we're beginning, that we really need to meet more than once a week, as Bobby pointed out last time, to get ourselves going here. So what is the most ideal? Randy, I wasn't sure I understood your comment here, is that we do Friday at noon, and that it just might mean that the afternoon committees have to give up half an hour. Is that what you're?
It's possible in the event that we get into floor sessions that last longer, that reduces the window of time available at noon. But if you then, through the chairs meetings and so on, and through the pro tem, establish at least some minimal time between the end of the floor meeting and the beginning of the afternoon committee meetings, that could carve time that we could use for this purpose, at least in the initial part of the session. And it provides some regularity and predictability.
Because the other noon times are out. Tuesday is out because there's the Democratic caucus. Wednesday is out because of the meeting with the governor. And Thursday is out because of?
Every other week, I have a climate solutions caucus, but
Yeah, we could meet those Thursdays, every other week Thursdays. But Chris and I have climate solutions and Andy.
and Andy.
Yeah, it would be great if we didn't have to do that, but
We also have to remember that there are a lot of caucuses out there.
right, but Chris is
And
co-chair.
it's,
Yeah,
I
it's
really,
not that I just want to be there. Well, I can do Thursday morning too. The mornings are not ideal and dependably available for me, but
Yeah, I think one of those
Yeah.
early morning starts is great, but I to do two in a row is a little challenging. Why don't we start with
Yeah.
the Friday and the Wednesday morning and see how we go, and we
Yeah.
can, we can pivot if we need to.
yep, I think you're right. Or we can take Randy's suggestion if we have to.
Yeah,
Okay, so Wednesday at 8, Friday at 12 or 12:15. If that gives us, even if we go half an hour on the floor, that gives us 15 minutes to regroup and do what we have to do.
will be a working lunch, I assume.
and when we're back in the building, that's going to be
Well, I mean,
we're going to have to build time in again to get all that stuff. So anyway,
Yeah, well, we'll cross that bridge when we get
Right,
there.
get there.
For the time being, we are remote and we can always bring our breakfast when we come and our lunch so that we don't have to make a special trip to get it. So, okay, Wednesday at 8, Friday at 12:15.
Can we just ask you, Madam Chair, or maybe Ameren? My impression is that the House has already passed its very first crude cut for the BCAs, right, or whatever they are, and then the Senate has to act on that just because it's a law, or a bill, but we don't really have to do anything ourselves, right?
Right.
So in some sense, our due date is roughly mid-March or something. Like, I mean, I'm not saying we should relax, but we don't have to do this in 3 weeks, right?
No, but I think there is some pressure here because we have a couple competing reports that we need to address, and then we need to look at it. And I personally think that the northern part of the state is going to be very complicated, and that is going to take a lot of time, and we need to allow time for people to come in and testify once we start dealing with maps. There are people from those towns who are going to want to come in and voice their opinion. So we need to allow that. So we don't do anything now with this bill. We just pass this one that they just passed. It goes to the governor. But yeah, you're right. We don't need to have anything decided until we need to have a bill signed or at least passed out of the General Assembly by April 1st, so that people know that's our deadline. Ameren?
Thank you, Senator Pearson. Just to answer your question specifically, the House bill was introduced, I believe, yesterday. It will be headed to the floor. I believe it's on the notice calendar today and up for second reading tomorrow. And looking back at the 2012 materials, historically, as Senator White indicated, the first initial districts bill just went over to the Senate and was passed, concurred with, passed out as is. And then when it came to the enactment of the final districts, the House bill went over to the Senate, was referred to the special Senate committee. The Senate committee then proposes to add on all of the Senate districts onto that House bill, and then it would head back to the House to be concurred with.
Well, we have to pass it first.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, yes. Once it was through the Senate, it would head back to the House.
Right.
And we just need, I think that, I don't know about the rest of you, but I think we need to be pretty clear in our minds that we are not going, when the House bill comes to us, that we're not going to start fussing around with it. And we need to get our colleagues on the other side to make the same kind of commitment that when we send ours to them, that they're not going to start futzing around with it. Does that make sense? I feel very strongly that we shouldn't interfere with the House work.
I don't recall that we did that last time, Chris. Do you?
20 years ago, we did.
In 2012, did the
No,
House?
20 years ago.
Oh, 20 years ago. Yeah, I wasn't in the legislature then, but I don't, when Chris and I were involved with this, I don't recall the House weighing in particularly on the Senate proposal.
It didn't happen at all last time, but 20 years ago, my understanding is that the Senate kind of completely redid the House proposal. Or something like that.
I don't think we should waive our rights, but I agree that that's the framework of moving forward. I mean,
yeah,
that would be the ideal.
So, okay, so now committee, we're almost out of our time and people are going to have to go to their other committees.
Correct.
Should we next time, I know that we didn't get truly settled on how to use Nick, but I think we'll just kind of play it by ear to start with. And I didn't see anybody jump up and down. Although Randy, I thought I saw you kind of bobbing there when we were talking about, does anybody want to be trained and be the specialist? Was that you volunteering?
Oh, I had a cramp.
Oh, okay. So what I would suggest for next time so that we can get going is that we invite the LAB in to present to us the majority report and the minority report. And whether we get through both of them at the same time with questions, I don't know, but we'll invite them to come. And that would be Tom. We'll decide how to do that. That's up to you, Tom. Oh, Mike, I see you have a question.
It was just on logistics before you end and go to your committees. Am I setting up meetings every single Wednesday and every single Friday?
Yes.
From here on out, does that include this Friday?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think so.
Oh,
Or since we already met twice this week, I don't know if we would have time this Friday to get them in for their reports.
yeah,
What do you think, committee?
or I don't know, ask Tom maybe if because if Tom is able to bring people in, it would be great. Although I have to say, I'm just going to be protective. We may need a joint rules meeting, and we may need this Friday. Maybe we may need that time.
Yeah. So let's forget this Friday.
Yeah.
Okay.
I in retrospect, yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. What do you think, Randy? I think we may
Agree.
need that next time.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I was
And-
thinking those same things too. So I just wanted to make sure we'll start with next Wednesday at 8 and next Friday at 12:15
Got
and go from there.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay.
Andy, did you have a question or were you raising your shade?
Raising the shade, I think.
Okay. Thanks. I'm trying to be aware of people waving their hands around. So, we will, does that make sense for next Wednesday AM to ask the board to come in and,
Yes.
okay.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll do that. And then, we'll continue this.
Bobby,
Anything
I
else?
gotta run down the hall and see a man about a horse, but I'll be in Senate Ag as soon as I can.
Okay. All right. So anything else before we leave?
Nope.
And so Tom, will you let Mike know who needs to get an invite to the Wednesday morning meeting to present the reports?
Yes.
Thank you.